We are very fortunate to hear next from an outstanding leader with such a lengthy resume that it would take the entire session to cover it all. Let me summarize by saying that she has spent an extremely distinguished career smashing glass ceilings and pioneering innovative leadership while protecting U.S. security and advancing U.S. values. In her current position, she directs a dedicated team to deter aggression, defeat threats, respond to crises, and to strengthen U.S. military partnerships with counterparts across the Caribbean and Latin America. We are deeply honored to have her address us today on climate action, regional security, and the road to the Summit of the Americas. Please join me in welcoming Commander of the United States Southern Command, 4-star General Laura J. Richardson. General Richardson, the Zoom room is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Ambassador Bassett. I really appreciate the very warm introduction, and it's my pleasure to speak here at this forum today. But greetings from Washington, D.C. It's really nice here this time of year, not too hot just yet, but I want to thank the Institute of the Americas and also the Scripps Institution of Oceanography and the University of California, San Diego School of Global Policy and Strategy for organizing this really important forum. Many of you have been, might be wondering, why is a U.S. Army general speaking at the Climate Forum? Well, I'm here because climate change absolutely impacts our national security and the security of our partners and allies. Today, I'll talk about the Department of Defense and U.S. Southern Command specifically, and what we're doing to take on climate change. So I have some slides that I want to show you, and so hopefully you can still see me speaking as well as see the charts that I have. I have maps and all kinds of things as I go throughout my presentation. But first, let me take a step back and explain exactly what United States Southern Command does. And SOUTHCOM is one of 6 geographic combatant commands in the Department of Defense. Our area of responsibility includes 31 countries, 16 dependencies in Latin America and the Caribbean. We also have representatives from 11 allied and partner nations and 15 government agencies here at SOUTHCOM headquarters in Miami, Florida. Some of our priorities include countering the malign activity of China, Russia, and transnational criminal organizations in the region. But climate change especially is a threat that we are taking very seriously. This slide shows the results of a climate risk analysis that DoD conducted last year, which addressed all the threats climate change is causing around the world. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has called climate change an existential threat to our nation's security, and he called on the Department of Defense to act swiftly and boldly to take on this challenge. Also last year, DoD launched its climate adaptation plan. And this plan recognizes that climate change is affecting military readiness and drains our military resources. And so the plan identifies 5 lines of effort to get after it. First, make climate informed decisions. Second, train and equip a climate ready force. 3, build resilient installation infrastructure. 4, make our supply chains resilient and encourage innovation. And lastly, number 5, enhance adaptation and resilience through collaboration. Latin America and the Caribbean are no exception. Hurricane season began 48 hours ago, and many of our regional partners have already been victims of devastating hurricanes. Just a few weeks ago, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration announced that there will most likely be 14 to 21 named storms in the Atlantic this year, and at least 6 major hurricanes. In November 2020, 2 Category 4 hurricanes, Eta and Iota, hit Central America back to back, displacing nearly 600,000 people, destroying thousands of homes, decimating livestock and essential crops like rice, corn, and beans in Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. Drought is another major threat. About 8 million people suffer from food insecurity due to drought in the dry corridor. A 1,000-mile long geographic zone that runs through Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. Then there's rising sea levels, and our Latin American and Caribbean partners are particularly vulnerable to this flooding. A few months ago, I visited Barbados, where I met Prime Minister Mia Mottley, who is a strong global voice for the Caribbean. At the UN Global Climate Summit last year, the Prime Minister said that a 2% rise in sea levels is a death sentence for small island developing states. The Caribbean is also very vulnerable to hurricanes. Hurricane Dorian hit the Bahamas in 2019, and Hurricane Maria hit Dominica in 2017. These climate threats, hurricanes, drought, and rising sea levels are worsening economic and food security and contributing to irregular migration in the region. Just when you think these climate change threats are bad enough, there are also malign actors who are worsening environmental damage in the region. And the biggest culprit is the People's Republic of China. Today, 21 regional countries participate in the PRC's One Belt, One Road initiative. This provides PRC-backed loans for key infrastructure such as ports, telecommunications, roads and bridges, agriculture cultivation, and mining projects to satisfy the PRC's own growing domestic demand in pursuit of a continued monopoly of critical minerals. But all too often, many of these PRC infrastructure projects contribute to deforestation, water pollution, or erosion. This slide is a specific example. And in 2016, Ecuador contracted a Chinese state-owned enterprise company called Sinohydro to build a massive hydroelectric dam at a cost of $3.2 billion. Now, fast forward to today, and that dam has 7,000 cracks in it. It's causing severe river erosion. The erosion resulted in the rupture of an oil pipeline spilling over 15,000 gallons of crude, which polluted the waters, destroyed the wildlife, and negatively impacted over 150,000 people. Needing a trusted solution, the Ecuadorian government contracted the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to fix it. The Chinese are also the largest offenders of the illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing in this region. When I meet with our Latin American and Caribbean partners in the region, IUU fishing is clearly one of their top 3 concerns. And the military in these countries are being asked to play a leading role to combat this illegal activity. This slide shows the sheer number of PRC flagged vessels operating in international waters near the Galapagos and the Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ, with their tracking devices on. However, they turn off their tracking devices to enter the EEZs to continue to raid the fish. Every year, there are about 350 to 600 vessels fishing in the area, severely depleting fish stocks, destabilizing the economies of coastal states, creating security challenges and costing the region nearly $3 billion in lost revenue annually. Fishing vessels also dump plastic waste at sea, polluting Ecuador's Galapagos Marine Reserve. They also violate state sovereignty by undermining international agreements and fishery conservation measures, and many of these fishing vessels are directly subsidized by the PRC central government. This slide shows the vessel's annual fishing patterns. Their paths are very predictable because they follow the fish. It isn't like tracking transnational criminal organizations where they keep changing up their routes to evade detection. And because these fishing vessels are predictable, we can easily track them and work with our partner nations to expose this malign activity and develop a coordinated response. I'll talk more about that later. Finally, we can't forget about how transnational criminal organizations, or TCOs, also contribute to the environmental devastation. I want to focus your attention to the right side of the slide. TCO activities extend way beyond just cocaine. It includes illegal mining, illegal logging, illegal fishing, counterfeit goods, illegal wildlife, and human trafficking. All of that amounts to an estimated 310 billion with a B, a year, more than many of the military defense forces budgets of our partner nations that try to combat them. All of these activities threaten regional security and increases instability. So what does USSOUTHCOM do to boost our partner nations' climate defense? Our 3 lines of effort: strengthening partnerships, countering threats, and building our team. And let me focus on the first two in the context of climate defense. First, we take a very predictive approach to boost our partner nations' readiness before a natural disaster strikes. We conduct annual humanitarian assistance and disaster relief exercises like trade winds. We also remain synced up with regional organizations like the Center of Coordination for Disaster Prevention, or CEPREDINAC, which is in Central America. In the Caribbean, it's the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, or CEDEMA. And then also in the Caribbean is the Regional Security System, or RSS. Southcom has helped establish 66 emergency operations centers and disaster relief warehouses in 18 countries, including Argentina, Barbados, Ecuador, Haiti, and Panama, to store and pre-position much needed supplies after a disaster strikes. We're not the only agency building our partners' capacity. USAID, together with NASA, is in the process of developing a Central American hub that will be used to support locally tailored, climate resilient decision-making and disaster risk reduction planning throughout Central America. USAID is also working with farmers living in the dry corridor to support the transition towards climate smart agriculture and resilient land use practices that improve water quality and quantity. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers also helps strengthen our partner nations' capacity in the region, which in turn counters threats. USACE, as we like to call them, works in concert with Southcom strategy and also our priorities. In addition to helping Ecuador assess and mitigate the erosion caused by the PRC-built dam, USACE is also providing technical support to the Panama Canal Authority's multi-billion-dollar water management project. They're also assisting Honduras with flood control, providing technical assistance to expand the port of Manzanillo in the Dominican Republic, and setting up Emergency Operations Center in Peru. Here are some more examples in South America, starting with Brazil. We're working with the National Water and Sanitation Agency on watershed development. The Army Corps of Engineers is working with Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, Paraguay, Uruguay on a water resources database for the La Plata River Basin, which affects all 5 of those countries. In Chile, the Corps of Engineers is conducting IUU fishing, subject matter expert exchanges. And in Argentina, they are working on a river management project, which is vital to the Paraná River. Through these U.S. Army Corps of Engineer projects, USSOUTHCOM is offering viable alternatives to PRC-funded infrastructure projects, and they represent the highest standards of transparency and anti-corruption, financial sustainability, labor protections, and also environmental preservation. Second, when a natural disaster does strike, Southcom responds quickly to save lives. For example, when the 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck Haiti last year in August, we immediately stood up Joint Task Force Haiti to provide the command and control for the humanitarian response in rescuing 477 people, delivering 587,000 pounds of supplies, and conducting 671 total missions. This was all in support of USAID as the lead federal agency for the whole of government response. As I mentioned before, when hurricanes Eta and Iota hit Central America in 2020, Southcom's Joint Task Force Bravo also supported USAID by coordinating and rescuing 810 people, supporting 295 missions, and delivering 350,000 pounds of food, water, hygiene kits, and other life-saving aid. Third, to counter IUU fishing, we're working closely with our Latin American and Caribbean partner nations, NGOs and academia, as well as leveraging technology to track and expose these Chinese governments subsidizing fishing fleets. Last year, the U.S. Coast Guard released its IUU fishing implementation plan, which stresses the importance the Coast Guard puts on this issue, calling it the #1 maritime threat. That plan includes sharing intelligence with partner nations, enhancing the Coast Guard's counter IUU fishing operations, and building multilateral coalitions to counter this threat. We know that the answer is not to build huge navies to patrol the seas. That's just not feasible. But Southcom has a memorandum of understanding with the NGO Global Fishing Watch so that we can share actionable information with our regional partner nations so that they can crack down on IUU fishing within their own exclusive economic zones. Let me give you an example. When certain fishing vessels intentionally shut off their automatic identification system for over 9 hours, which suggests that they're up to something nefarious, we can share that data with our partner nations for them to act on it. Another crucial lever is that we must consider shipwrighter agreements, which allow US and partner nation law enforcement officials to intercept suspicious vessels in each other's territorial waters. Last year, we worked with Global Fishing Watch and Florida International University to organize a 2-day IUU fishing workshop. We brought together some of the foremost subject matter experts on IUU fishing, and over 3,000 people attended virtually. Finally, we're playing a supporting role with initiatives that our regional partners are spearheading. A great example of this is the CMAR initiative, announced by Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, and Panama at the UN Climate Summit last year. The CMAR links several existing marine protected areas and creates an uninterrupted, sustainably managed biological corridor spanning more than 500,000 square kilometers. The US government is expected to sign an official MOU with these 4 countries to solidify our cooperation on CMAR next week during the Summit of the Americas. My point is this: climate security is national security, and Southcom specifically plays a crucial role in climate defense and disaster relief. We're using a whole of government and whole of society approach, working with our partner nations, interagency, including the State Department, USAID, NGOs, industry, academia, and people from this audience to prepare, respond, and thrive in the face of these growing environmental threats. Regional collaboration and unity are absolutely essential in all of this. If we do that, I have no doubt that we can all work together as a team to defend our nations under all conditions today, tomorrow, and for years to come. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General, for a very informative and comprehensive presentation on Southcom's vigorous engagement on climate change and its impacts in the region. I'd actually like to raise just a sort of a platform question with you. You just said, climate security is national security. Is that a perception that you find shared across the region?
I think that, as I visit all the different nations and the countries that are in the region, 31 countries, 16 dependencies, and I meet with their leaders, especially the military or defense forces. They are extremely concerned, in terms of having the ability to respond. And clearly what SEDEMA is doing and Sempretanak and having those warehouses, putting pre-positioned supplies together. Is it shared throughout the region? I think it absolutely is in the countries that experience this, specifically in the Caribbean and the Central America. And they're wanting to do more in order to protect themselves from it. And certainly I think our Department of Defense adaptation plan, how we need to train in extreme weather. We have to be able to encounter that, not be afraid of it, not wait until it passes. In some cases, you have to wait on certain things to pass, but there are things that you can do to prepare for that and to harden yourself, so to speak, against all the repercussions and impacts that are going to happen from climate change. I still think that there's more work to be done, obviously. This plan just recently came out in Department of Defense, and so but it brings to light all of these sorts of things, and I think that we can just continue to improve over time when time really isn't on our side. So I think the urgency is there, and it's good to develop all of these plans and figure it out, so to speak, as we move forward.
I'm speaking to you from California, where we are officially in a drought. I know that Paraguay, Chile, and many other countries in Latin America are facing, that sort of back and forth between tremendously painful drought complicated by suddenly torrential rains that prompt devastating flooding, specifically in Paraguay, which is where I used to work. The levels in the hydroelectric dams that supply energy to both Paraguay, Argentina, and Brazil in different conformations have reached alarmingly low levels. Energy insecurity, infrastructure damage as a consequence of climate change. Is this another component of that sort of climate readiness you talked about in terms of the defense posture that we take and that we encourage the region to take?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for that. Our Corps of Engineers, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, just recently returned. They've been working on the La Plata River Basin, as I mentioned in my remarks, and then also the Parana River, and working with these three countries, so specifically Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina, but to overcome the drought issue and that sort of thing. But I look at all of these things as threats. So not just malign activity that I called out and exposed, but also drought, food insecurity, all of these things all compete and contribute, I should say, to create irregular migration. It puts people, it puts families on the move. They don't have food security. They can't get food. They can't grow food. They're not going to stay there. And so this absolutely contributes to the irregular migration, the insecurity, the instability, and it's just clearly another threat. And so we're working very hard with our partner nations to try and overcome that.
Thank you. Yes, and I do just want to mention, because we are in a global situation where the situation in Ukraine has also aggravated food supply, which again, as you say, clearly has an impact on political stability in a region very close to, in fact, in your testimony on March 22nd, you call this our neighborhood, which I think is a great way to think about the region and our relationship to the region. So thank you for that. The Summit of the Americas is back in the United States after a very long period of time. The first one was hosted in 1994, and just next week, Los Angeles will host the current Summit of the Americas. What are the opportunities you see in terms of raising awareness for the idea of climate change as a national security issue that requires a different posture from militaries?
Yeah, so that's why it was really important for me to be able to speak to this forum. And so again, I really appreciate the invitation and just to share what we are doing and how we are trying to help our partner nations and work very closely with them. Also offering, alternatives to projects that aren't done so well. We have a lot of activity in the region. 25 of the 31 countries in the region have One Belt, One Road initiative projects, infrastructure projects that are ongoing. 21 of the 31 countries have signed up for the BRI initiative. And so just in terms of talking next week, all of those things factor in to looking like there's investment in the region, but maybe not necessarily. When I go to climate change and that sort of thing, and with Department of Defense's new adaptation plan, and really getting after it, it really just, it just kind of, maybe expose isn't the right word, but it just brings to light that that this is absolutely something that we need to deal with, and we need to counter, and we need to figure it out, or it's just going to continue to cause insecurity and instability. Not just in my region, but the entire globe. Thank you for that.
We do have some questions from those who are watching your fascinating presentation. And one of them is actually a representative from Global Fishing Watch. And I think that what your relationship with them demonstrates is the importance of partnerships. I was often forced to correct people who thought that sort of diplomacy and military engagement were different sides of a coin, when in fact, as you demonstrate, it's actually all of us holding hands together, working in the same direction. Can you talk about your partnership with Global Fishing Watch just a little more, and how it happened that an NGO, as I understand they are, became a SOUTHCOM partner?
Yeah, so thank you for that. We have a wonderful relationship with Global Fishing Watch, and really, as we were trying to figure out how to work this problem set, as we, the one slide that I showed, just the sheer number of vessels, and that's just in one area. It's all around the South American area and some of Central America as well. So it's clearly the PRC gets 36% of their food source from this, from my region. And so, so quite honestly, in terms of, we have a very close relationship with Florida International University, University of Miami, and agreements. We have a huge intern program in SOUTHCOM as well with FIU. And so it just all fit naturally together. And so as we were looking to ways to expose, really, we don't like to get the credit in SOUTHCOM for exposing malign activity. It's better come from presenting the information that we have to folks that advocate for that particular problem and to the partner nations. And so just as we were looking in terms of the, you know, what can we do about this problem and how do we provide the information to someone so they can expose it and get after it? Because our adversaries, they do not like to be exposed. And so they don't like to be called out. And so that's absolutely what needed to happen. And we continue to do that as we come across this malign activity, because we already have COVID that has really run havoc over these countries in the SOUTHCOM region, and they're still trying to dig out of the economic impact of that. I like to say 8% of the world's population is in this region. They suffered 33% of the world's COVID deaths. 8% of the economies contracted, and 22% of the populations are flung into poverty. And so when you just look at that and you have this going on with the fishing and the lack of, or the lost revenue as a result of the IUU fishing, it's not right. And so that's what we try to be, the trusted partner, the United States, and demonstrate that time and time again with our partner nations. And just help them be able to, I like to say that we invest, we don't extract. And we have partners, we don't have clients. And I can't say that about our adversaries.
Fair enough. Speaking of adversaries, there is a question about Russia and Russia's role in the region.
Yeah, so the mostly what I see the malign activity with Russia that I like to get after and try to expose is the disinformation. A lot of the partner nations call it fake news. I call it the disinformation that happens. And certainly Russia, with the profound social media apparatus that they have with Russia Today, Espanol, Sputnik Mundo, over 30 million followers in this region. And quite honestly, as we know, young people get a lot of their information. They don't have cable, they don't have satellite, they have their phones, right? And they have streaming and they have social media, and this is how they get their information. And so what we try to do is do exactly the same thing. We have agreements that we work very closely with the FBI. We work with our counterparts to expose things that are happening maybe on Twitter that they try to act like that's not associated with Russia or a particular country, but when actually they are, and we expose that to the task force, who then works with the social media agencies to take down some of these sites and things like that, if they're actually not really who they say they are. And so Twitter bots are another thing. And we see this popping up, this disinformation campaigns around the region, especially when there's an election coming up. And so, and as we know, propping up certain candidates that might undermine or just in terms of the undermine US opinion or thoughts about a society, about the United States, completely undermining the United States in the social media space. And so we try to help our partner nations counter that as well, but very active in the disinformation side of the house.
Thank you for that. And, as I reflect on some of your answers, I realize that so much of what you're describing are actually shared challenges. The COVID experience, of course, was a global experience, but acutely felt in the United States as well as across the region. The climate change, there is not an isolated impact of climate change. a hurricane in Central America prompts a migration challenge, for the region, and that cascades in different ways across, the entire space. And disinformation and those challenges with managing your relationship with reality and those who try to manipulate is something, of course, we're very familiar with in the United States as well. And I do think this shared experience and this collaborative approach is something that has informed Southcom's engagement with the region so that it's mutually beneficial. Particularly, I wanted to invite you to talk about the exercises that prepare and exercise all of our skill sets for disaster response, because as I remember from my time, they were a learning experience, not just for our partner nations, but for us as too. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. And so we do 8 exercises a year. And quite honestly, what I'd like to say is, for our folks that are competitors in the region or adversaries, they can't bring partner nations together. And so we just concluded Trade Winds, and Trade Winds brought 21 different partner nations from the region together to work interoperability so we can communicate with one another, how we counter the line activity, how we respond to disaster response and those kinds of things. And so quite honestly, as we continue to train together and work with each other, you really are working what I like to say, working the bugs out in terms of when something really happens for real. And we already know each other. We've already been working with each other. We've already been getting after it and getting more prepared and hardening ourselves and themselves to how to respond and how to just withstand the impacts that are going to occur. And so really happy to do that. One other thing I want to highlight, Ambassador, that I think is just a huge strength in Southcom is, I find the Western Hemisphere a very collaborative group. And quite honestly, I think there are a lot of lessons learned and best practices, so to speak, that we have in Southcom. And I think, quite honestly, it starts with, I have a civilian deputy that's an ambassador, and she's Ambassador Jean Maines, and former ambassador to El Salvador, and will be soon going on from Southcom to be an ambassador again. And within the region, I've got political advisors at all of my commands. I have 8 subordinate commands. And so, and then we have DoD teams. I call them our security cooperation offices that work out of the U.S. embassies in all of the countries as well, and work with our partner nations. So we have people forward deployed. And so just the relationship with the ambassadors, and the U.S. Embassy teams within the region, and then also Department of State is just really strong. I have 3 liaison officers from USAID that are in my headquarters as well. I talked about the interagency that's already in the headquarters. And then I also have foreign liaison officers from 15 countries that are in my headquarters too. And so it's really just a tremendous effort to work together. Secretary of Defense has a term called integrated deterrence. So if we use every lever, I call it all the levers out there, work together, it's harder for the malign activity of others to penetrate that or whittle that down. And so I like to say that we use everything that's possibly available to be strong as partners and to help each other out, so to speak, in the neighborhood. And with the proximity to the United States, mostly what happens in Latin America and the Caribbean ends up, eventually coming to the homeland, to the United States. And so it behooves us to work very well and very collaboratively together.
Right, and we're always mindful of the important trade relationships and interpersonal relationships that also link our region in very powerful ways. I have a question that's a little maybe science fiction-y. In your posture statement in March, you talked about greening the military as well and looking at technologies that would allow the military to move forward in a more green fashion. And I think there might have been a solar-powered aircraft mentioned or some solar-powered capabilities. And you suggested that Southcom was playing a leading role. Is it possible to share a little bit about how the military might be greening itself?
Yeah, so I think what I'd like to encourage all of the services within Department of Defense and other agencies is to use the Southcom region where we're not in conflict, right? And we don't have adversaries maybe paying attention so much because it is a huge AOR, but that we can collaboratively innovate, test, do laboratory kind of things. And test new technologies, right? And put them to use in real world missions as well. And so just trying to get after that latest innovation and technology. We have several projects with all different kinds of agencies that we're working within the region. And quite honestly, I think it helps to further advance, but also at a quicker pace because it's close. It's usually about the same time zone. And so we can do a lot of things really close to the United States that we can test and innovate on in the Southcom region.
And you find willing partners in the militaries there that are interested as well in developing green technologies?
Absolutely. Because we like to have what I call domain awareness, right? You got to be able to see things in order to understand who's coming in your AOR, what are they doing? Are they nefarious? Like the slide I showed on with the fishing vessels, right? And the tracking devices. We're also able to track if those tracking systems are turned off and when they actually go inside the EEZs. So that's where I don't want to give the impression that they all are minding their manners and staying outside the EEZ because they will not hesitate to turn that tracking device off and enter into the country's EEZs to raid the fish.
Thank you. We're heading down to just our last few minutes. So I wanted to just invite you to reflect with us a moment on what you see as the greatest opportunity for sort of neighborhood engagement as a whole on trying to help the entire region anticipate, mitigate, and perhaps respond to the effects of climate change, and where you see the biggest challenge. So the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenge from your perspective related to the region and climate change and Southcom's very important role.
Yeah, so I think quite honestly, as we continue to get after climate change and be able to prepare and be ready for what's next, and certainly the weather and climate change things that are happening are getting more impactful. And so as we work with partner nations, it's being able to work with all of them, not just work with the ones that are close to where, Southcom's based out of Miami. And I recently did a trip about 3-4 weeks ago to Argentina and Chile. Well, Argentina is 10 hours away, and that's if you got a nonstop flight. And so the thing is that we clearly see there's a lot of activity down in the Southern Cone and the Strait of Magellan and the Antarctica area. And so a lot more than people realize. And so we're very concerned about nefarious activity as well. And so as we proceed to work with our partner nations, just being able to be there for all of them when they need help, but be that trusted partner. And so certainly you've got to be able to deliver on their needs too. How do we help them out? How do we understand what they're going through? Certainly right now, some of the sanctions that we have against Russia impact some of the, countries in my region, the fertilizer, Brazil being able to get fertilizer for their country, Paraguay, the beef, right? Russia was 30% of the beef consumer. Well, they can't sell the beef to Russia anymore because Russia can't pay for it. So how do we, just make sure some of those things that are happening right now don't further impact the country and countries. So quite honestly, I don't have all the answers to how to move forward, but we've got to move forward. We got to share what we're doing to prepare and in the training of our military and defense forces against climate change, and then obviously help them figure out how they can best respond as disasters occur.
Thanks. I have been asked to just one follow-up question. You talked about the CMAR and that this will be an agreement signed at the Summit of the Americas. If you could just help us know if there are any other specific climate-related outcomes that you expect from the summit that would impact Southcom's engagement with the region, or is CMAR the big ticket item?
Well, CMAR is the one I'm tracking, and as far as any others, if there are that are rolled out and signed, I'm a proponent for that, but I don't know of any others right now. But I might not be fully in the know from Department of Defense on those great things that are moving forward. But certainly they help in terms of like having an agreement, having a strategy for going forward. And so, but really excited about the CMAR one.
Yes, and I will say that from my experience, these summits continue to work up until the last minute, and you have surprising but sometimes unexpected but positive developments up until the 11th hour. So we will hope for that. General Richardson, you have been incredibly generous with your time and incredibly insightful with your presentation. Thank you so much for honoring us with your presence, and thank you for your service, not just to our country, but to our neighborhood. We're deeply grateful. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation.